Now let's look at deploying a SharePoint app to on-premises. Let's look at the things that you need to be looking at for infrastructure planning, setting up your app catalog, authorizing accounts, pushing packages, and validating packages. For your infrastructure planning, make sure and identify a location for your hosting. You can do SharePoint hosting, that's one of the options, but if you have a choice, looking at some other provider might be interesting, either internally or even if you're picking up SharePoint applications from the SharePoint store. They may be even hosted outside of your organization. Be aware that you know what's going on with that location and what the impact may be. Provider-hosted options have to deal with their uptimes and their availability. Internally hosted applications generally have to worry about uptimes of those systems, which may or may not be as well controlled as your SharePoint. And if you're actually hosting in SharePoint itself, remember that now you're competing with SharePoint resources and making sure that you don't start causing issues with one or the other vying for those resources. Make sure that you enable the App Management Service and Subscription Settings Service. These are two features inside of SharePoint that need to be running that generally are not running by default. These are if you're actually doing SharePoint hosting. Make sure you configure the DNS entries to support the apps entry. What this is basically SharePoint looks for specific DNS entries to point it to where the apps are hosted. If you're setting this up for the SharePoint hosting, you need to have that set up in the proper place in your SharePoint front-end servers. If you're using some external hosting areas, then you need to make sure that those point to the correct areas there. Configure the central administration for apps hosting, making sure that those apps are ready to go, that SharePoint knows about the resources, knows where they are, and is able to reserve some capability for those SharePoint apps. And then enable a development location with the developer site template. As you saw when we were going through with the Visual Studio section of this course, that's an application that's a template that's available not just on the Office 365 area, but actually on your development environment that we showed you how to set up. So you can actually drop that in when you want to push it up into your actual production environment. You want to make sure you have that as well, so you can test on the actual production environment and ensure that everything's going to be working correctly. Once you've configured the infrastructure, you'll need to create your app catalog site collection. SharePoint uses, again, as you see over and over again, you see SharePoint using its own capabilities to support itself. So with this, you have a site collection that handles your app packages. They're actually stored, if they're the files that are going to be served out or are being used, are being stored inside of the SharePoint libraries. So you'll be able to actually see what's going on as you're working with the approval process. You can actually put workflows on these apps in your catalog so that if you're doing updates or the rest, you can actually do versioning on them. So a lot of different capabilities of SharePoint supporting the SharePoint app catalog as well. And the app catalog should be managed as any other SharePoint administrative site collection. Make sure that the right people have access to this, that you don't open it up to everyone. When you're working with the app catalog, you can either enable or disable it for general access, so people should be able to see the right number of apps, and it should have the right visibility inside your organization. It's also recommended, just like you're recommended to have your own search accounts and other administrative accounts, have specific accounts for your app catalog management. This way you don't have the wrong people pushing out apps. It decreases the vulnerability, make sure that everything kind of flows through the correct process. Operations should be included and will likely insist on owning these accounts. They're the ones who get called when things don't work. They're the ones who actually are tasked with making sure the SharePoint environment as a whole is stable and functional. So they will probably be the ones who want to do final sign-off that the apps are acceptable. They will probably want to be the ones who push it up into the SharePoint catalog, and they want to know what's going on. The accounts will be the administrator in your app catalog location. So again, fairly easy to see how it all fits together, but just think about this and know that it's kind of a additional area that you need to be looking at for your app catalog. The app packages can be pushed through Visual Studio Publish Wizard or through the SharePoint package. We did a quick little push with the SharePoint, with the Visual Studio to SharePoint. In the demo here, we'll look at how we can actually make sure those packages are correct and actually deploy them through command line. So you'll see some of the details on there. The packages are uploaded to the app catalog document library. They're stored in SharePoint, and that you can actually make sure that you have versioning in place, that you can actually do change notifications. All those things that you normally can do with workflows and event handlers in SharePoint apply to your app catalog. So you're in very good shape if you're used to working with SharePoint, managing SharePoint sites. Then the app catalog is managed pretty much the same way. So away you go. The wizard and upload process prompts for the appropriate package information. So if you need different information, if you're actually forget anything, the process will help you through that to make sure that you get everything right. Again, we'll look at that when we go through the process and the demo, and you can see how it all comes together. Having said that, let's go into the demo and go through a quick little deploy to your local catalog. So if you have a local SharePoint deployment, often one of the things you're going to be doing is deploying solutions to that deployment. What we're going to do here is walk through the process of taking your web part that you created in the Visual Studio section of this course, and we're going to package it up and deploy it to our development SharePoint environment. So you saw that we actually were able to do the deployment through run and do debugging. We're going to actually look at this as packaging it up, and normally we would give this package over to our operational staff, and they would actually install it on whatever production servers we had. So here on the screen, you can actually see we've got our list web part that we put together. We've got our standard project that we've got here and our list web part. One thing I am going to do is add one additional item, and that additional item is going to be a very simple, actually let's just put an XML file of a support XML file. We're not actually going to put anything in it. We're just going to make sure that we've got an additional file here for me to show you how some of this, some things work. So we've got our features. Open it up, and you see we've got feature 1. We'll go in and double click on that. And one of the nice things about the tightly integrated tool set is that Visual Studio knows all about features and packaging. So what we're going to do is we're going to come here. You can see we've got our title, our SharePoint feature 1. We've got our description. This is a feature for our list web part. And we can actually do a scope. We can set it up for a site, a web, a farm, or whatever. Let's actually go ahead and set it up just for the entire farm. We like our list web part a lot, but we can actually put this for the different levels. The farm is for everything. Web applications for specific ones. Site, of course, is for websites in a site collection, and a web is a specific web. So you can actually be pretty specific about how you focus this in when you're putting together a manifest. We're going to say that this one needs to be the entire place. You can actually come down here and we can see the files. We've got the elements and the rest, and this is what we put together. We've also got a feature activation dependency. We've got, if we wanted to come in here and say we had multiple features, we could actually take this and it would give us the additional features. Say we had 5 features in the solution. We could say that one or more of them were a dependency of this feature, and that your features would therefore have to be activated in the correct order. If there are features outside of the solution that you know you have dependency on, but you're not providing with this solution, you can add a custom dependency, put the title and the feature ID, which is really important, and really the important part, and your description. And therefore, when this feature was installed, installed onto the SharePoint site, it would not activate, or it would not even, it could be added but not installed until you were able to have that dependency met. So you can actually go through and do some very nice lifecycle managements on this, be able to see what's going on with it all, and then you can always go in to see the manifest itself, the XML, just to make sure that everything's just like you're expecting. So we've got the feature in place, we've got that, and then what we can actually do is come down and we've got our package, we've got our details on the package, where it is and all the rest of it, and we double click on it as well, and now you can see that we've got the SharePoint feature in here, and then we've got the project item, or listless web part, that we can, if we wanted to, we could remove it and add it back. We can tell it to reset the web server if we want to, if there's something in there that we really need to have that happen. We don't need that for ours, so no worries about that, but if there was a situation, you can actually specify that when you're going through. And then we got our advanced. If we've got additional assemblies that may be coming in, they may not be specifically in one of the features themselves, but may need to be supported. You can come in and add existing assembly or from project output. So if you've got something that's project in this solution that's being built, but then not included in the solution, you can pull the assembly from that output. And then once again, you can see the manifest. And as you can see, we've actually got our SharePoint Project 1 assembly. We've got a public key token. We've got the namespaces. It's done all of this for us. This is something that we used to have to go through and try to make sure everything was in place, try to make sure everything was put together correctly. Now it's all being done for us with the tools. Nice and simple and easy. So we've got that set up. All we have to do is do a build, make sure the build succeeded. And one of the things I like to do is just come down here. Let's open the folder in the File Explorer. And let's go down, and you can see Visual Studio has created our SharePoint Project 1 WSP, our Windows SharePoint package. So we've got it all in place. It's all been compressed up, so we're ready to go forward and deploy it. So quick as a wink, we jump over and we go to our server. We've copied that over, and now we're going to we're on the actual production servers and put it into place. So how do we actually install that? One of the things we look at is the SharePoint management shell. This is actually a customized PowerShell. Basically, it gets all of our environment variables and our paths straight, so we're in good shape there. So I'm going to jump down Administrator. One moment while I get us into the correct directories. Nice thing about having just a SharePoint project. And there is our SharePoint Project 1 WSP. One of the things I'm going to do just to make things a little bit simpler, that's an awful long path. I'm going to copy it up to the root. Don't recommend this for in production, but for doing demos, I'm sure I would flub something, type it in. So I'm going to make that path a little bit shorter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the add SP solution and do a literal, and our C colon, since it's up on our root. Let's see if I've typed everything in correctly. And you see we've taken our web service package and pushed it up into SharePoint. We've got a solution ID in place, we've got it in place, but note the deployment is false. Why is that? Because SharePoint lets you install those, add those solutions into SharePoint, but in order to actually use it, then you have to actually do the install. So identity is SharePoint Project 1.WSP, and we do, and I'll go ahead and do this, and I'll show you what we get back. And you see it tells me an error. It says the error is that the solution needs to install assemblies. We have a DLL, so it needs to be installed into the GAC. If you fully trust it, now let's add the GAC deployment parameter. And normally you'll actually have to do some discussions with your operations guys when you're pushing this up. You should have some processes in place. I think that I'm happy and all like that. So let's go ahead and put that in place. And now it says we need to put it in one or more locations. So what it's telling me is, even though I said it's an entire farm solution, I need to tell it where to be. And one moment while I check my note. A good reference for all of the PowerShell commands is invaluable at this point. You want to make sure that you've got all of the different information, and you need to know what's going on with all of the items, and that's what I'm flipping through. And what I'm going to do is add in all web application. So this is going to tell it I'm telling it give free rein to put it on, add it to all web applications. We go through and we now have our web part installed. If we go to the website itself, we'll be able to see that we can add it in on all websites. So that's all you need to do. If you need to go in and remove it, you just do a, instead of a install SP solution, I'm going to need to remove a couple of those parameters, but let's go through here. And it has been deployed. I need to retract it before so I was going to remove it. Just need to do a uninstall before I do a retract. Let's go ahead and do that. You can see how a proper piece of process document is really, really useful for this. I'll do an all. And once again, I need to do my and we're good there. And now let's do our remove. Do our override, and it's already been gone. So while we were going through doing this, the timer job actually kicks it off, and we've installed and removed our package. So very simple to do, doesn't take a lot of time, just a good reference document for all of the parameters, and that's how you actually install and remove solutions in SharePoint 2013.